International rules. You hear about them all the time, right? In the news, in politics. They kind of just seem to be there. But have you ever really stopped and wondered who actually writes them? Where do these global rules for everything, from air travel to the internet, actually come from? Okay, let's dig in. You know, it's a tempting thought, isn't it? This idea of some secret group huddled in a dark room somewhere, pulling all the strings and writing the rulebook for the entire planet. Is that what's really going on behind the scenes? Nope, not even close. The reality is, well, it's way more complicated, but it's also a lot more interesting. There is no single all-powerful group that just creates laws for the whole world. So if it's not some secret government, then how in the world does it actually work? All right, to really unpack this, here's the game plan for this explainer. We're going to start by hammering home that there's no world government. Then we'll look at who really holds the power, what role these big organizations play, uncover the hidden work of the experts, and finally, figure out why the whole system moves so darn slow. Okay, first things first. The whole system of making international rules is decentralized, and that's on purpose. There's no top-down command structure. Instead, the rules bubble up from what can be a really messy, collaborative process. Think of it as a system built on a whole lot of negotiation and agreement, not some top-down command. So if there's no big boss, who are the most important players in the game? Well, that's where states come in. And by states, we just mean countries. From the biggest superpowers to the smallest island nations, they are the main actors. They're the ones with the real, ultimate authority. And you've got to understand just how much power they have. They're not just there at the end to sign on the dotted line. No. They're in on it from the very beginning. They're the ones proposing ideas. They're the ones at the table negotiating the nitty-gritty details. And crucially, they give the final thumbs up. Nothing becomes a binding international law unless countries agree to be bound by it, period. You know, a really good way to picture this is to think of a huge construction project. In this scenario, the states, the countries, they're the clients. They're the ones who commission the building in the first place. They decide what they want it to look like, and they have the absolute final say on the blueprints. If they don't sign off, nothing gets built. But of course, states can't just do all this by themselves in a vacuum. And that brings us to the next piece of our puzzle, the big international organizations, or IOs, like the UN or the World Trade Organization. Their job is absolutely vital, but it's also really easy to misunderstand. See, these organizations, they're not the ones dreaming up the rules. Instead, think of them as the support crew. They're the conveners, they send out the invites, and get everyone in the same room. They provide the meeting halls and the framework for the negotiations to actually happen. And they act as the secretariat, kind of the administrative backbone that keeps the paperwork flowing and the whole process on track. So let's jump back to our construction site. If the states are the clients, then the international organizations are the project managers. They're the ones organizing the work site, coordinating between all the different teams, managing the schedules, and making sure the whole project runs smoothly. They make it all possible, but they're not the ones designing the building. So, in a nutshell, their job is to facilitate, to make everything easier, smoother, and just more efficient. But, and this is the big but, at the end of the day, states decide. This distinction right here is probably the single most important thing to grasp about how the world is run. The IOs work for the states, not the other way around. All right, so we've got the clients, the states, and the project managers, the IOs. But who's actually, typing the words, drawing up the specs? It's usually not the politicians. This is where we meet the hidden layer, the experts, the ghostwriters of global rules. And this is why, if you've ever tried to read one of these international agreements, your eyes just glaze over. They're super technical for a reason. The people writing them are engineers figuring out aviation safety standards, or scientists defining how to measure something, or lawyers getting into the weeds of trade procedures. They're the specialists, hammering out the details. So in our big construction project, these are your architects and engineers. They're the ones with the super specialized knowledge to actually draw up the detailed technical blueprints. They're figuring out the plumbing, the wiring, the structural loads, all the complex stuff that makes the building actually work. So let's put it all together nice and simple. Step 1, the experts, the architects, draft the highly technical text. Step 2, the international organizations, the project managers, manage the whole process and get everyone to the table. And step 3, the states, the clients, review those plans, make their changes, and give the final authoritative green light. That's the flow. Okay, so when you put all these pieces together, what kind of system do you get? Well, you get a system that is, by its very nature, deliberately slow, incredibly technical, and built for one thing above all else: stability. And it's really important to get that not all rules are the same. There's a whole spectrum. Way up at the top, you have your big, heavy hitter treaties. These are legally binding, and they take forever to negotiate between states. Then you step down a level to something like a technical standard. That might just need a consensus among experts, and it's often totally voluntary. And then at the bottom, you have guidelines, which are really just advisory, like sharing best practices. So this is why everything seems to move at a snail's pace. I mean, can you imagine trying to get almost 200 different clients to agree on the blueprint for a skyscraper? Just reaching a consensus is a monumental task that takes tons of time and compromise. In this system, making sure the final result is stable and predictable is way more important than getting it done quickly. So, after all of this, what's the one single thing you should remember about who writes the rules? What's the core idea of this whole system? It's this. It's all about the process, not some central power. Global rules emerge from this complex dance between expert drafting, organizational management, and state-level approval. There's no king on a throne handing down orders. It's a system that's literally designed to build agreement from the ground up, piece by piece. And that, of course, leaves us with a really big, kind of scary question for today. This system was built for a different era, a world that moved at a much slower pace. But what about today's challenges? Things like AI, global pandemics, climate change. These things move at lightning speed. So if this slow, consensus-based process is the main tool we have, can it possibly keep up? That's the million-dollar question.